welcome to A Lady Well Traveled. I'm your host and creator, Shannon Bednarova, and I'm delighted that you've joined me today. My podcast exists to help you transform the whole of your traveling experience into one that's less stressful and, above all, more enriching and pleasurable. I've spent my life traveling and I want to share what I've learned with you so that you can breeze into your next dream destination confident and capable, prepared and ready to enjoy yourself. Today's episode is called What You Gonna Wear When Traveling? Let's Dress for Success. And it highlights a pet peeve of mine, which is the absolute disregard some individuals have for adhering to any kind of dress code while traveling by air. You may be unaware of this, but airlines do have dress codes for the traveling public, and they enforce them when necessary. They typically reserve calling out passengers for not wearing enough clothing, i.e., something like a bikini top and short shorts on a flight on the way to the Bahamas, or a t-shirt or a hoodie that has an inflammatory message or maybe a pornographic image on it. They'll often ask the passenger to put on more clothing or to cover up appropriately. Did you know that going barefoot is actually forbidden on all airplanes due to safety reasons? Kicking off those shoes during a flight can get you into trouble if you don't put those shoes back on, or at least wear socks while moving about the cabin. Specific airlines may also have certain restrictions based on their hubs or home bases. Qatar Airways, for example, the dress code is stricter because the stopover is in Doha, which is where their home base is, and it's located in a conservative Muslim country, Qatar. For example, there are no sleeveless shirts or tanks allowed, and pants must be no higher than your knees. No shorts are allowed. Now, unfortunately, other poor judgment in attire may not be addressed, but trust me, all of this is noticed by the entire flight crew and the ground staff. But there'll be more on that I'll talk about later. Call me old-fashioned, but I was always taught that you dress better than the job that you have when in a professional position, and I've adhered to that for my entire professional career. There are multiple studies that detail how people judge your appearance and choose how they respond to you based on first impressions. The old dress for success thing. This can impact whether or not they choose to do business with you at all. Dressing neatly, being clean, and having well-pressed clothing is a sign of respect for others and yourself as an executive. Why would it surprise you that interactions in the world of travel should be any different? I think if you can afford a plane ticket, you can afford a presentable set of clothing to wear on a plane, no matter what your budget may be. If you're paying attention, you'll notice that the captain, co-pilot, and cabin crew, as well as all the ticket agents and gate agents, wear uniforms, and they look polished and professional. Why is that? Because those uniforms represent the fact that they're trained professionals who command respect, and they've earned it through their service to the flying public. Years ago, when flying was only available to those passengers with means, passengers dressed to the nines or like they were going to church when traveling on a plane with hats and gloves and men in suits because it was considered a privilege and something extraordinary. Nowadays, airplane travel has become commonplace and it's a trial to endure instead of being an enjoyable adventure. In our post-COVID world, where people get offended if you ask them to dress in anything more than business casual clothing, it seems that passengers really have lost all sense of what appropriate attire is for plane travel. Instead, they dress like they're going to a strip club, a nightclub, to slop hogs, or maybe to bed. Remember earlier when I mentioned how all the airline employees paid attention to what you were wearing and how you appeared when you checked in and when you boarded the plane? Well, they sure do. And I'll tell you why. The first unwritten rule of the airlines is that they look for well-dressed individuals to upgrade to business or first class, whenever they have empty seats. Why is that? Because it fits their public narrative that people who sit in first or business class are well dressed. So it follows that they must have more money, they must be successful, and have more wonderful lives than everyone else. They all must be millionaires, drive Ferraris, have yachts, blah, 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 blah. Of course, I'm joking, but have you ever seen an advertisement for Emirates Airlines first class that's filled with people who look unkempt or trashy, that have on SpongeBob pajama bottoms or curlers in their hair? No, you haven't. Neither have I. It's always Jennifer Aniston or some other fabulous celebrity talking about taking a shower while in midair and then having a bottle of shishi foo foo champagne in the lounge while the rest of the peasants on the plane in economy class eat some dirt. So when you walk down the aisle, past those in first class, on your way to your seat in row 28B, and you see them sipping their first class champagne and eating their warm mixed nuts before takeoff, you may wonder, what do I need to do to get into that seat? And what are they doing differently? And what do they know that I don't know? Well, I just told you. It's in how some people dress and appear that gets them special treatment. Now you know. I can personally vouch for this tactic. I always dress stylishly when I fly. I've been offered upgrades many, many times when flying and have been plucked out of economy and moved to first class. This has also occurred when I was paying for upgrades and I was chosen among several passengers. I have often gotten the last seat in overseas first class when multiple passengers had requested it, and I believe I was chosen based on how I was dressed. I fit the profile that they wanted to have in their first class seat. Now, if you don't believe me, let me read you an excerpt from a travel article called Flight Attendants Explain Why Airline Dress Codes for Passengers Exist, and it was written by Eben Diskin. Here's the excerpt. Carolyn Paddock, a former flight attendant for Delta and the founder of In-Flight Insider, a bespoke company for private jet owners and travelers, advises travelers to dress nicely, even if they're not doing so to adhere to a dress code. Dressing well makes you stand out in a positive way, she says. In many ways, it's a sign of respect, and airline employees respond very well to seeing passengers who are dressed well. And take note, according to Paddock, well-dressed passengers are more likely to be eligible for upgrades than those who are dressed sloppily. One unwritten rule is that dressing well makes you a candidate for potential upgrades, she says. On one occasion, when I was flying for a commercial carrier, we were boarding an oversold flight from New York to Milan. Coach was oversold, and there were open seats in business class that were going to use to accommodate our passengers. The gate agent asked me to choose 6 appropriately dressed people for the upgrade. I walked through the coach cabin and chose 6 passengers who were the most polished and well dressed. I thought you would find that interesting from a former Delta flight attendant. So you may say, Shannon, okay, I got it. You're driving that point home. I shouldn't dress like I'm going to feed the farm animals if I want to stand a chance of getting noticed for being well dressed and getting an upgrade. So what should I wear? Okay, let me tell you. If you've ever worked as a business professional, you can really never go wrong with business attire when you're flying. That goes for gentlemen as well as ladies. Business casual is okay as well, as long as it's neat, clean, and professional. Wrinkled pants, that doesn't fly. They need to be pressed and look nice. Ladies, you can always look for travel-ready clothing in wrinkle-free or wrinkle-resistant fabrics that are fashionable and fit into any budget. And I think it's also worth mentioning that personal grooming and hygiene is very, very important in presenting yourself as the polished professional that you are when flying on an airplane. I talked about things that were appropriate, so let's talk about the things that really aren't appropriate. At no time are pajama tops, pajama bottoms, bedroom slippers, or robes appropriate for airplane travel unless you're an infant or a toddler. I've seen grown women come down the aisles of airplanes in the most ridiculous get-ups you've ever seen. And they look like they've climbed right out of the bed to get on the airplane. Some have even been wearing curlers. I kid you not. Now, the only exception to these rules are as follows. If you're flying in first class overseas and they give you pajamas to change into before settling into your fabulous ensuite bed for some shut-eye, then by all means, enjoy those PJs. Change back into your street clothing before departing the plane. If you're flying in business class and you brought your own PJs to change into before settling into your lie flat sleeper for some rest, then do so and change back into your street clothes before departing the plane. If you're flying in coach, I never recommend changing into PJs. I just think it's a bad look and you simply don't have the privacy that business or first class affords you. I do think it's okay, however, to change it to more comfortable clothing for sleeping, like sweats or a soft sweater, and then changing back into your street clothes before you land. Another exception to this PJs or night clothing rule is if you're flying on a stretcher because you're sick, incapacitated, or a wounded soldier. You get a pass and you can wear night clothes or basically anything you want. It's also never appropriate to show your derriere, no matter how Instagram worthy you think it is. The same goes for your belly button and your boobies, ladies. Enough already. Have some self-respect and get dressed. So there, I'm off my soapbox. I'm so happy you've joined me for another episode of A Lady Well Traveled. You can reach me at Shannon at A Lady Well Traveled. That's Shannon at A Lady Well Traveled with 2 L's in traveled. I'd love to get your feedback or suggestions for the program. You can also follow me at A Lady Well Traveled on Instagram. Please tell your friends and family about the podcast and ask them to join me on their favorite streaming platform for the next episode or download previous episodes. So until next time, remember that God loves you and He created this exceptional world just for you. You simply have to get out there and see it for yourself. Bye-bye.